First of all, thank you for taking some time this evening to go join in the most unconventional chat with the superintendent. Although I will give it this, I think we have more people have shown up tonight than most of mine. I think one time I brought coffee and 2 dozen donuts, and it was me and 2 other people. So it's just nice to see more than just 2 faces. But I'll just leave it open and let people ask questions, and we'll just go from there. I know there are a lot of people that are anxious about graduation. I'm sure that there's some people that are anxious about distance learning and when we're going to be able to not distance learn and get back in classrooms. And so we'll go from there and just see what questions people have, and keep going. And I've got plenty of time. It's not like I'm going to be heading out to dinner at a restaurant or to a movie theater anytime soon.
So Betsy already submitted a question about candidates, so I'm going to unmute her and let her ask it herself, and then we can get started. Actually, I can't unmute you. Betsy, can you unmute yourself? Or Leah?
Just find her.
Hi, I got it.
Okay.
I'm just wondering, I know there was a job posting for Bill Burkhead's position, I believe today, that went out. Were the candidates that were in the running for the middle school notified, or was that just an internal email that went?
So for those who haven't seen, Bill Burkhead, who's the principal at the high school, has gotten the position as superintendent at Scituate Public Schools. So we posted today for a high school principal position. Our middle school principal, Mark Wilson, is retiring at the end of this year. So we went through a hiring process and just concluded that. So we do have people that were in that hiring pool, and we will be reaching out to them to see if they'll be interested. And just the nature of it, Adam O'Shea, who was the middle school assistant principal, moved into that principal role. We'll have to hire for a middle school principal. Jamie Girolamo, who's retiring at the end of this year, we'll need to hire for a high school assistant principal. So we'll reach out to the people that were in the middle school pool to see if anyone's interested. But we'll also stagger our assistant principal hiring after about a week after the high school principal hiring, so that if there are great candidates in that pool, to see if they would be interested in being a assistant principal at either the middle school or high school. So good question.
The Morrises had a question about graduation. I don't know if you want to go ahead and dive into that right now.
Great. Hi, we were just wondering if there's any information about graduation and when and how it might be conducted.
Great question. For those of you who don't know me, graduation is one of those things that is near and dear to me as well, having a senior at Monomoy this year too. So I'm peppered almost at every dinner, sort of Dad, any decisions about graduation. I think there's a lot of challenges in terms of what graduation is going to look like this year, period. And I have been. I think last night I was having a sleepless night, tossing and turning as I was thinking about graduation, and I was sort of thinking, what does my son and his peers really want from a graduation ceremony, and what do I, as a parent, want for my kid and even my parents from a graduation ceremony. And I think some of the challenges that that we're going to have is I had a parent email me a couple days ago, and it was a great email. They were commenting that the Air Force Academy pulled off a graduation that that people were able to go watch on television about 2.5 weeks ago, and it's sort of like, well, if the Air Force Academy can do it, can't we? And some of the challenges with the Air Force Academy graduation is that it actually violates the governor's orders in Massachusetts. So at the moment, one of the big things that we have to kind of contend with in Massachusetts is there is a governor's orders on what the social distancing and what some of the restrictions should be. And at the moment, there's an order that limits gatherings to 10 people, which is actually down from a gathering of 25 people as the crisis was first playing out. So, so in the Air Force Academy graduation, if you saw it, all of the graduates were 8 feet away from each other in this grid. So there's 1,000 young men and women 8 feet away from each other, but that's violating, at least in Massachusetts, the amount of people that we can bring together in an area. So, so there have been some great suggestions, and as an administrative team, we had been working on what I refer to as Plan B. If we can't be under the tent, let's start a Plan B. So we spent the first month and a half, 2 months thinking about a sort of a Wellfleet drive-in type graduation, knowing that one of the things we're blessed with is a huge front yard at the high school. And so we did a layout, and we had this way where every family could be in a 30 foot by 30 foot square on that front lawn and still be 15 feet away from any other family. So, and that they could actually drive their cars in those 15-foot lanes into their square, and nobody gets out of the car, but we're all together. But the challenge is it's bringing more than 25 people together, and it violates some of the governor's orders. So on some level, we have to go and see, is there going to be a relaxing on bringing together a gathering that still is socially distanced, like the drive-through approach to a graduation? And if not, today I was meeting virtually with the high school administrative team and our technology folks in the district to start talking about a Plan C, which would be some sort of hybrid graduation, which has a virtual component where we're watching some of those speeches, but some sort of live component in terms of a live passing of a diploma. But either one of those scenarios isn't something that I think we as parents or our kids have ever dreamed of as a graduation. I think the thing that this will be my 21st graduation helping plan. And I would say from a student's perspective, having watched 20 graduations over the past 2 decades, they have absolutely zero interest in what I'm saying as the superintendent or when I was a principal. They tune in somewhat for their peers' comments, but they just want that diploma, and they want that celebration and those hugs and that connection after that diploma gets passed out. And the challenge we have is things like like this from past graduations afterwards, or this can't happen in a situation, or even this one's like a great sadness I have. It's like the picture of the whole class together, in a scenario where there's social distancing, none of that can happen. So I think there's some have asked, well, could we push back the graduation date? And the answer is yes. And I suspect if we push it back into July, and even if we push it back into August, we're still going to be at a place where social distancing of some sort is still a operational challenge.
So we have another question that sort of relates that Stacy asked. I'm going to have her go in 1 second, but I just wanted to let everybody who's joined the meeting in the last couple of minutes know two things. First is that this is being recorded. And the second is that if you have a question, you can go ahead and put it in the chat box and we'll kind of go through them in order and call on you when there's a moment to have you ask your question. So Stacy, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your follow-up question about seniors. You're still muted, Stacy.
There we go.
There you go.
Sorry, I'm used to Zoom at my district. So I completely agree on the graduation and understand that. My question is, are there any other things that we could be doing for the senior class? I know that one of the things that we have seen is how kids are really appreciating the simple things. Like, I know I've been to many a birthday car parade, and I know that that's a silly thing, but even the older kids are enjoying that. And is there just a possibility that we could add some different things that we've never thought of just to make it special for these seniors?
So definitely yes. So Mr. Burkhead and his administrative team is meeting, I believe, tomorrow with the class officers. And I think their want is to still have a senior week, whatever that, however that looks in a socially distanced way. But, but we do want to go and do as many special things as we can for a set of kids who are definitely not getting the graduation and senior week that they had hoped for or wanted.
And then we have a question from Chase that's pretty detailed about distance learning. So Chase, I'm going to let you unmute yourself and ask away. I'm still here? Chase Mallon, if I'm saying that correctly.
Let me see if I can unmute her for you.
Okay.
I was trying to find the button. It's actually Andrea Chase is my son. It just logged in from his account.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, it's okay. So I know I've talked to Dr. Millen about this, and I've talked to Ms. King about it, and I have had some difficulties, I think, as every parent has, and the staff as well, when we're moving into distance learning and the challenges that presents. And I feel like some of the criteria that public schools meet on the normal basis, making sure they're including all children, no children are left behind, being all inclusive, is becoming a bit more of a challenge in distance learning. So decisions are being made, and I think that there's not a lot of or not enough of parental feedback, and they're making these decisions that influence our kids without really asking if it would help or how it would help. And for me in particular, I have a child in kindergarten, and I know that they sent out this very vague survey about specifically what could you guys do to make distance learning more efficient and more effective and easier for us at home. And it was an open-ended question. So rather than being able to open up a discussion where different parents could say, okay, like, I know a big suggestion was to make the meetings, which you guys originally made staggered, so that they would be all inclusive, and that no matter what the home situation for the child is, one of those times should be able to work for that child. A lot of parents didn't like that. They wanted the consistent one time a day situation. So when they said that without much more details besides I want a consistent meet time, there was no follow-up on that. There was no, well, what days work best for the majority of the class? What times work best for the majority of the class? Those decisions were made internally without any additional parent feedback. And what that resulted in for me in particular was that my child is not able to participate any longer in the regular meetings because the meetings are held at 8 o'clock and he's not able to make 8 o'clock. Whereas before he was making almost every meeting, now he's completely left out. And I just think going forward, there needs to be a little bit more inclusive decision-making processes before major district-wide decisions like that are made. And that I think that the convenience is important because it's very inconvenient how we're doing this distance learning, and we need to find a way to make it a little easier on parents. But that shouldn't be at the sacrifice of being inclusive to all students. And I think the staggered in the beginning made it more inclusive because you have essential workers who are working 11 to 7, and how are they going to make their kids get to school at 8 o'clock in the morning if they're not just walking through the door at 7:45, 8 o'clock as it is? So I just wanted like some input on if there's any ideas on moving forward, how we're going to be able to structure the program so that we're getting a little more feedback and maybe being a little more inclusive to our students, particularly ones who lost a lot of services and aren't able to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I can comment on that, and glad to let Mary and Robin chime in too. I think you're right about when we surveyed folks, one of the things that we heard loud and clear from families is that a large number of families were finding the rotating schedule that we had in place initially rather maddening for coming up with some consistent schedule at home. When we first launched into distance learning, I was deliberately, sort of advocating for a rotating schedule for just that reason, that if a child can't be in morning meeting at 8 o'clock one day, the meeting's not always at 8 o'clock. We would do the same thing when I was a high school principal, where we would rotate the schedule so that if the child was still a little groggy for morning and English was in the morning, that they weren't always having sort of a bad English experience, that there would be sort of a rotation there in the day. But I definitely hear you that it creates challenges for families, and I guess what I would encourage maybe at the elementary level is that if we can identify a classroom that has a consistent challenge while the schedule is published one way, I think there's latitude within any given classroom to when that morning meeting could happen. But I also think we have to kind of acknowledge that that given the scenario, I think no matter what, there's not going to be any perfect time for all families in a classroom, but we can at least try and see if there's something that we can do to meet in the middle there.
So those are actually all of the questions that have been entered into the queue in the chat. I don't know if anybody else has something they want to ask. Raise your hand, stick it in the chat if we want to let just Scott talk for a while.
Come on, Julie, you have something that you wanted to ask.
I got nothing. I have nothing, Scott. Nothing.
So how about I noticed we have a number of parents of seniors. If you were the high school principal and superintendent, what would your recommendation be? I say this because last night I was on a chair and vice chair Zoom session with Miss Games, who's also in the same boat as many of us with seniors. And Tina and I were having a long discussion about some of the challenges we have. And one of the things that I did today, Tina, is I reached out to both of my parents And I had mentioned prior to you getting on that, my parents have not missed a graduation on my side of the family. I mean, they will travel across country to see cousins' graduations and this and that. And both of my parents today are balking at coming to a graduation, getting from Missouri or Pennsylvania out to Massachusetts for a graduation whenever we hold it. And there's this, and you can sense there's this sadness on their end, but there's also this just hesitation and fear about, what does travel look like? So that's a little sadness that I'm carrying today, that that it seems that the longer that this social distancing is going on, I think the more they're starting to to get worried about actually leaving home. And of course I'm seeing the opposite thing with my kids. I think the longer this is going on, the more my kids want to see their grandparents. And the more I think I'm like having to pump the brakes with my own kids, saying, look, grandma and grandpa, really are a little hesitant to have us get in the car and go visit.
So we did have a couple more questions pop in. Bonnie and Mark have a question about class time for high schoolers. So if you guys want to unmute yourselves and ask away.
Hi, Scott. Question is to whether there was any discussion about having more class time, meaning screen time, with the entire class that might be a little more interactive than is currently being run at the high school level. I understand it's a challenge, but
yeah, some of the challenge, and I hear you, I get it, I understand it, and I think some of the challenge is the balancing act with our teachers and knowing what they're having to juggle at home. Like I could defer to Miss Cleary, who I'm sure is trying to juggle raising, what is it, 2 children there now? So balancing 2 kids at home while she's trying to teach, and I know that I have a couple teachers that have almost a half dozen at home that are young, that so I was kind of clear with our teachers as we launched into this that we all have to understand that these virtual meetings sometimes could turn into chaos in the background. I've been in these Zoom sessions where all of a sudden my dog has like hopped up in my lap, wanting attention at the wrong time. But I think I think there's definitely a want, I think, to have more or longer sessions. I just don't think that that we can carve that out without having. We could have longer sessions, but they would end up being fewer in number. And I think there was a balancing act where we we tried to sort of stretch out the blocks a little bit, but still trying to balance the teacher time, and also trying to have it so that teachers who are oftentimes being both parent and teacher have a sort of narrow width of time in a given day where they have to try to have some other calm happening in the house so that they can make a lesson happen. So I think if we're looking further out into the future with distance learning, I think we're going to have to revisit some of how we operate, and I think particularly when it comes to moving a curriculum forward. And there's new directives that have come out in the past few days from the Commissioner of Education, where they have sort of taken the state's curriculum and pared it down to, here's the really essential stuff that we need to start moving forward. And it's been sort of a gradual change from the state level, from just do enriching things and distance learning to, okay, we actually have to start moving things forward, or kids are going to start falling falling behind on what they really need to learn.
So there's some more conversation in the chat about seniors and graduation. So it looks like the conversation is hoping to go back that direction. So I know, Betsy, you had a suggestion you wanted to discuss, and then Stacy had some, nope. Okay. So I don't know if you want to discuss that, Betsy, in this forum, or you were just sharing it for future thought. If you want to talk about it more here, you're welcome to unmute and discuss it.
Hi. Yeah, I heard that DY did a parade recently for the seniors, and I think somebody just chimed in that police and fire were there, and they made it kind of a celebration of the seniors. So I didn't know if that was something we could do with the seniors doing a parade through Harwich and have people on the sidelines cheering for them and waving flags or whatever, with being socially distanced and being responsible, but still kind of saying, we're proud of you and we're excited. So just an idea. It doesn't necessarily have to be part of the graduation, but something we could do before they're done with school.
Yeah, I definitely think that can be something that can get woven into the overall senior week. I noticed in the chat that one of the questions was fireworks. I had actually gone down that path, and I think the worry that was expressed by some in Harwich was if we did a sort of an evening drive-in movie style graduation on our front lawn and had a huge screen to project everything onto, and I was proposing we do fireworks afterwards. I think the worry was we'd start bringing so many more people from the community together that we've already blown the gathering restrictions that the governor has out there, that we just kind of, I think the concern was that we would start creating our own little Harwich hotspot, and that's something that they suggested that we try to not have as part of the plan.
And then the Morrises had some additional input about graduation they wanted to share.
Great.
We were just hoping, and this is the feedback from our seniors, is that possibly we could put it off as late as possible, maybe mid-August, hoping the restrictions lift enough so that we could do anything close to a graduation with the kids walking across the stage, even if it's just with original families.
So I think that'll probably be one of the things that Bill and the class officers are going to talk about tomorrow. I think if I look at the cards at what's happening in other states and just where this is going, I do think that short of some sort of vaccine, we're going to find ourselves in a pretty awkward situation. June, July, August, even, and it's. I think everybody would love for me to go and say, yeah, August, everything's going to be better. But in the news this morning, the governor of California was saying, just trying to say, well, other states are relaxing social distancing. He's sort of forecasting that he anticipates that the social distancing that's been happening in California is going to need to continue for the next couple months. And, so I do think that, Massachusetts has been sort of following a similar parallel in terms of how they're approaching social distancing with many of the West Coast states. And I suspect that we're going to find ourselves in a similar situation anytime in June that we'd find in July and potentially August. So if you read in between the lines there, I'm already starting to get gray hair about what September of next year looks like when it comes to us getting back into classrooms. So I'm sure things will be much better in Sandwich, though, Julie. Okay.
So Andrea had another question about communication and the different websites being used, if you want to pop in and ask that.
So that was another question that I had that seems to be like very confusing, is that there's a lot of resources that the individual teachers are using. So we're navigating a lot of sites that way. And I'm finding that I'm getting a lot of emails from Dr. Millen, from yourself, and from just all of the staff. And it's getting kind of buried in all the other COVID-19 information that's getting thrown at us from our vets and our doctor's offices and everything else. And it's hard to shuffle through all those emails, and I'm missing a lot of information. And there's also information being posted on Bloom's, and it's being posted on one of the 5 different classrooms. And there's a lot of information, and it's easy to be missed. And I was wondering if there was some form of platform that all those major announcements, like this particular meeting and that kind of thing, could be published to, so that we can stay on top of what's going on without missing it because we just didn't see the email or something like that, something we could check in on. And
I'm going to interject real quick before Scott does, just to say that most of those announcements will be on our website, and you can find them. Anything that's at the district level, you can find on our website, all of Scott's messages, all of the calendar items, and that sort of thing. You can find it there. That isn't always true for school or teacher specific, but the kind of district level information will always be on our website. And then I'll let Scott take over now.
Yeah, I definitely feel your pain. In fact, I have never asked my assistant to go into my inbox and try to weed out emails. But even today, I think I have, looking over here, I have 320 emails in my inbox.
I know what I'll do.
The vast majority of them are going to be COVID-19 related. And, so so you find yourself weeding through, all of this information. And I think there's a lot of people, a lot of companies that want to go and provide help and everything, is just trying to figure out, it's like, okay, what are the essential ones that we need to get to? And what are the 15 companies that are selling us or trying to sell us some sort of product to go, deal with this? But I think it is a lot of information. I know that, every bank and credit card that, that I've been part of is sending me emails, and it's that challenge on how to not get buried by it all. But I think that, as Joyce said, there are spots that you can go to on the website where we try to kind of organize the district COVID-19. And I know that, that each of the principals try to put out sort of one weekly email communication. And I think if you look at the Chatham Scoop, or, at the Harwich Elementary, that was at the Happenings, and I think those have, sort of everything that's kind of coming out from that building sort of, organized in one spot. And I actually think there's probably, you can, I think, probably what's coming up from the building level I think for most families is, I'd argue, more important than the superintendent's Friday musing on COVID-19.
Stacy, did you want to jump in to talk more about Senior Week? Okay, we'll just take a note of your suggestion. And Rebecca, you had a question about varying workloads. So if you want to unmute yourself and ask away.
Okay. Hi, I feel bad because I know you already answered this. I got sidetracked by my children, but I've noticed I have kids at Chatham Elementary, the middle school, the high school. I have to say the middle school is doing, I think, the best job out of all the schools. They are just amazing with the workload. I'm just curious because I feel like I have a 10th grader and an 8th grader and then a 6th grader. And I feel like the 10th grader and the 8th grader are, I don't want to say barely going to school, but they just, for example, today my 10th grader had one class at 12:30 and it was for all of like 15 minutes and that's all he had for the whole day. So whereas my 6th grader logs in at 8:45 and he's straight on, off and on till like almost 2 in the afternoon, and his teachers are fantastic. But I'm just kind of curious as to why I feel like my high schoolers are just, they never seem to have homework. If they have class, it's, oh, I get 10 minutes here, 15 minutes here. I mean, their teachers are great, but I just am not really sure why the high school doesn't seem to. I understand like the seniors, they're pretty much, finished off for the year. But I just was curious about that because, like I said, the middle school has done a phenomenal job with this whole distance learning. The elementary school's okay, but I feel like I don't know what happened with the high school. So I missed the response you gave to Bonnie and Mark. So I apologize if you're repeating yourself.
No. I wouldn't repeat myself on this one. I think it's good. I think it's a great question, and I'll wear my hat as a dad on this one. So a dad of 2 high school students. Both of them operate at very different speeds when it comes to academics, and they're very different in terms of their diligence. I've got a 10th grader who focuses on the academics, and she is working flat out from about 8:30 in the morning till 7 o'clock at night, and has been doing this throughout social distancing. My son, who's preparing for a bunch of AP exams coming up in the next few weeks, I see him doing work, but he finishes really quickly. I have to admit, if he were not a senior, I would probably be sending a little email to some teachers encouraging them to go and bury him with some additional work. And I think I would actually almost recommend to reach out to some teachers and just say, hey, my son or daughter could use a little more. And I think some of our teachers are really good at differentiating and providing some more things for students to do. But I think it's this balancing act that each of the teachers is having in terms of what can the average student get done at home and accomplish without being in class with that teacher for an hour a day. But I do think it would be fair to go and reach out and send a note and say, hey, he could use some additional something. And I think a lot of our teachers are great on that differentiation front. And sometimes I think it just takes a little something from home to go and let the teacher know who needs more.
Betsy had a question about our meal service.
Hi. First of all, I just want to say great job. I know everyone's been working really hard to get food to the people that need it. And obviously you're allowing everyone that wants it to get it. But I just wanted to know, do you have any way of tracking who's accessing it and if everybody's getting it that needs it? I know you're driving to people's homes now and other people can pick up. Is that correct? I just was curious how that was going and if you have a good sense of that.
Right. So I can even, so on Monday, we started a Sharks on Wheels. That my concern was that, that we have consistently been having, anywhere from about 150 families or 150 breakfast and lunches heading out from the middle school cafeteria, and somewhere between 200 and 250 breakfasts and lunches going out from the high school cafeteria. So combined, if you combine those two numbers, we're looking at about 400 breakfasts and lunches heading out each day. So we're serving 400 kids. That's about half the number of who was on free and reduced lunch prior to this. And so a concern that we have had is that despite having the meals available, do we have families who need the food but aren't accessing the food. So so what we have done is just put something out saying, if you need it, you don't have to be on free and reduced lunch, because there were families who were fine prior to us going into this COVID-19 sort of economic shutdown, and there are families that now are in need. So just let us know. So if you can't get to us, we'll come to you through the Sharks on Meals or on Wheels. So we started that on Monday. We have 52 families that have signed up for that, and we have the capacity to go and get to any family who needs it. We're just so we have had some of our some teachers and some of our counselors have reached out to say, hey, this family could use it. We've been able to do some outreach to to families, but we need, before a bus shows up on their doorstep with food, we need the family to go let us know that they want us to come do the delivery there. But when we deliver on Mondays, we're delivering on Mondays and Thursdays. On Mondays, we deliver meals for Wednesday or for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, so they get 3 days worth of lunch and breakfast for each child that needs it. And on Thursdays, we go out and deliver Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so they get breakfast and lunch for 4 days for each child that needs it in those homes.
So there is some suggestions being shared in the chat, but there are no more questions. If anybody wants to ask a question, this would be a great time to toss it in there, or we can just let Scott go again and talk some more. No questions?
Well, I can chime in on Plan C graduation thing that we have talked about today. And I think Mr. Burkhead will be presenting this, since as I said, I don't know when or if even this summer we'll be seeing the gathering restrictions change to the point that we can bring together, even if it was just the graduates on our front lawn, to have to have 125 graduates and dozen or so staff. So we have been looking at, well, how could we do a socially distanced graduation that has a live component to it, but also also has all of that the speeches and music and everything else. So I see that one of the suggestions is, could we have almost like a drive-through graduation? So we have discussed potentially doing that thing where it's we'd have graduation on such and such a date at such and such a time, and pre-record on the front end of graduation, and on the back end of it actually have faculty and coaches who know students come and do live and a live delivery of and presentation of a diploma at each household. And I think if you go back to last week, the NFL draft, and how they were just jumping from one house to the next house to the next house as different teams were coming up and different individuals were being drafted. We've been exploring how we could accomplish that using technology where there's a pre-recorded thing on the front, but we're actually having the live presentation there, and it's happening. It's happening so that each family can celebrate together, and that each of us in our own homes can go and see that happening live. So we're actually going to do a test run on the technology behind it next week to go and see how feasible is that to. So I think I gave Steve Cass, who was our television production person, a little angst today when we were walking through. It's like, okay, Steve, what we need you to do is pull in 125 different live streams over the course of an hour and a half. And he's like, okay, well, we can do it. And it allows us to go, and as we bridge from one handoff of a diploma to the next, to kind of go back to some of the neat things that used to happen at Chatham High School's graduation, where they would have a little video presentation, that would have a slideshow of the kids. So we could have a slideshow that's happening on the television. It has, the different scholarships that the kids are getting. It has, what their future plans are. That there's the handoff of the diploma, and then we go to the next, to the next one. So I think there's a way to, to come up with that hybrid, if we can't find a way with this era of social distancing to bring everybody together in one location. Other questions? Charlie, I'm counting on you for a question.
Well, I do have one, Scott. I was wondering, what's the goal for by the end of the year to get the students in terms of progress through the curriculum?
So it's a good question. And I had mentioned earlier that the commissioner has released a set of they've kind of taken the state's standards and have pared that down to, here are the essential things we need to make sure every student gets at the end of each grade level. I think that I'll have to work with my team and our teacher leaders to take that document that the commissioner has put out in the past week and look at where we have gotten through already at each grade level, and what needs to be accomplished in any grade level. So there's, that's all. It's new stuff, but we want to make sure that we're at least getting to where that document is, because I anticipate on the other side of this, when we do return to that new normal and we are able to get back into classrooms, that's what the state is going to be sort of launching. Any sort of direction the curriculum has to slide is going to come off of that, missive from the state level.
So should we expect that, say, a sixth grader going into seventh grade next year will be starting with seventh grade curriculum, or they'll be filling in gaps from sixth grade curriculum, based on the documents you're seeing from the commission?
Yeah, so I think that I think it's going to be a little bit of both. I think that my hope is that our students are going to progress far enough along that we're going to be seeing sixth graders doing seventh grade curriculum. And I also know that there's an imperfect nature to all of this social distancing, and that there are going to be kids who are going to have gaps. And I anticipate even statewide that, and my hope is that we're going to see funding at the other end of this to potentially have some extended school years for some kids who need gaps filled. And so I think that we're going to have to kind of look at where everybody is on the other side of this, and work towards that.
We have another question from Bonnie and Mark about classroom placements at the high school.
So it's kind of similar, piggyback on the curriculum question. I mean, there are going to be some gaps, and we are concerned about our other son who's going to be going into 10th grade, and is he going to be behind like other kids? We know it's obviously not unique for our 9th graders. So we're just wondering, when would you do assessments? How would you know if there's a gap with particular students? And
but also what placement with regard to classroom and coursework for the sophomore year? When will those determinations be made, and how? Normally they'd be meeting with the teachers, obviously.
Yeah. I think it's probably a bigger question that I think we're gonna see for next year. I think both at high school, middle school level, a delay in scheduling. Typically what we try to do at the end of each school year is be able to send our high schoolers home with, here's your schedule for next year, and that their teachers have gone through, we recommend you for this class and that class. I anticipate that we'll still see that same process go through. That we're going to see recommendations for if it's you're in algebra 1 at such and such a level, here's the geometry that you should be going into next year. So I anticipate we'll see that same sort of process at the high school. I do think a challenge that we're going to have, and this is not to be to cast an ominous cloud, but I have at the moment no idea what budgets are going to look like in our 2 towns, and it's hard for me to kind of tell you where we're going to put kids when I'm not really sure what the staffing is going to look like. And so I am a little concerned, and until we hear from both Harwich and Chatham what the fiscal wherewithal of the town, we put forth a budget for next year that is a level staffed budget. So all the staff that I anticipate having for next year, it was a 2% increase. We were able to meet Harwich's fiscal wherewithal, but all of those budget conversations were before any of this hit. And so I do wonder, as we head into town meetings that have been proposed for both towns for June 22nd, what the real budgets are going to look like for next year. And so we can't really schedule until we can go forth and do a staffing exercise, and that one is all budget depending.
Hey, Scott, can I just jump in there for a second?
Sure.
Everyone, Mark Smith, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment for the district. So I know, and a couple people have already put it in the comment section, but the high school specifically is already, the scheduling process actually starts pretty early for the 2nd semester. So teacher recommendations have already been in. Maybe not all, but most students have had guidance counselor meetings already. And I know the guidance teams are continuing to work on the schedule. And then for the middle of the high school transition, I know, because I've been involved in some of the conversations around sort of 8th grade algebra and some of the other pieces. I know high school and the middle school have been working behind the scenes. Originally we had already had a plan to have things happen a little bit faster, but this has slowed us down. But there's still stuff being done and process being done right now to keep all those things moving forward. And to the larger curriculum question, there are definitely going to have to be adjustments made. The principals and I have been in an email conversation about a document that some folks up in, one of the nice things about all this is a lot of the school districts from across the state are all in the same boat. So we're all working collaboratively together. So an assistant superintendent up in Melrose created a document to help look at the standards that the sort of priority standards the state had put forth, and she created a nice document that sort of allows you to track what was covered pre social distancing and school closure, what is being done in this interim and this remote learning period, the way to just like visually track like classes as they move through, so that'll allow us in the fall to know, because there's gonna have to be some, we're gonna have some just even there's the individual student piece, but there's gonna be chunks of information that we're missing for kids. So this will allow us to zone in on what that looks like. He created the document for K to 5, and so it's a great resource. And I'm taking that template and switching or extending it so it'll include all the 6 to 12 as well. So it's, we may not have a solid answer right now, but we're definitely, it's work being done in the background for sure.
So we have someone in the chat who doesn't need to talk, but is asking you, Scott, to discuss the issue of school starting in the fall. Are you worried about that? What are you thinking? What's your plan?
I'm definitely worried about what the fall looks like. I think we need to keep our fingers crossed that that modern science goes and comes up with a scenario where we can all be back together again sooner rather than later. But I think that we're going to see over the course of this summer at the college level first, whether colleges are going to have kids back, but they're, I know my niece goes to Pitt, and Pitt is wrestling mightily right now with are they going to have kids back in dorms starting in late August. So I want to be sure that before we have folks back in our classrooms that it's safe for our staff, it's safe for kids, and that that we're not contributing to to what some of the scientists are saying is the potential for a fall spike in COVID-19. But I'm also somebody that went into this pandemic knowing the science behind it. And when I was a administrator back in 2009 and H1N1 came through, the spike happened, it was most prevalent in October of the year it began. It began right at the same time of year that COVID-19 began here and spiked in our country in October. Thankfully, it was a milder disease than what COVID-19 is presenting, and thankfully, because it was a flu variant, they were quick to come up with a vaccine. And that I actually had a vaccine clinic when I was at Lincoln Sudbury and ran a vaccine clinic, and we had the entire district with parents signing off, largely vaccinated the moment the doses became available. So I can hope that that we see something on the science side that can put everybody at ease soon with this. But I do think that that there's going to be a lot of concern on what it looks like to see schools open back up, and there's a good chance that my admin team is going to be working with our teachers this summer to look at what distance learning 3.0 needs to look like for next year. And one of the things that I have shared with people, a concern I have about a school year that launches with distance learning is that when we started this process, one of the things I was glad that we could do is leverage the power of connection. So we have kids that were connected to teachers in classrooms, and they were, the teachers are able to go and leverage that power of that connection to have that child show up. I mean, at the moment, I think one thing this district can be really proud of, we have the same attendance rates in distance learning classrooms that we do in our regular school classrooms. So we're having, we have daily attendance rates, kids showing up in these virtual meetings at about 95%, which is about the regular attendance rate for kids coming to school in a regular brick and mortar high school or middle school or elementary school. So, so that part of distance learning is going well. The challenge becomes, will it be as effective if there's not this immediate sort of first person connection with the teacher when we move forward? So, so I think we have to look at what does that look like if that's where this is going to end up. But I do think, there's a lot of calendar that, between now and the end of August.
Bonnie and Mark had a question about Chapter 70 funding. I don't know if they want to hop on and ask it or just have me ask.
So the Chapter 70 funds, what percentage of our budget that is? Chapter 70 is a fairly small percentage of our budget. I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but the vast majority of our funding, 80% of our funding comes from our taxpayers in the two towns. So Chapter 70 is around a 10+% amount of the budget. So again, the ability of Chapter 70 to go save the day or state funds to save the day when it comes to our budget is going to be quite limited.
And vice versa. I was thinking the opposite, Scott. Sorry. Meaning Chapter 70 funds might be cut next year, meaning they might be available, and how that would impact us. But that's
I actually think that the Chapter 70 funds could be cut. I think at the end of the day, the state's going to have to look at. So Chapter 70 funds are the money that comes from the state to run our budget, and again, the vast majority of our budget happens locally. I'm more worried about the local funding. I think that the state funds could get cut because I know state revenues are down, but we have a very unique economy here in Harwich and Chatham, and a lot of that funding comes from property tax, and you have this mix that's going to be happening in towns all across the Cape. There's property tax that the towns can anticipate, but there's some individuals that aren't going to be able to pay that property tax, and they'll go in the rears, which is going to create a cash flow situation for communities. And then beyond property tax, they have things like meals taxes. Well, there's takeout happening, but it's not close to what it was. There's short-term rental tax in Airbnb things. There's hotel tax. So all of these taxes that help support our economy are going to be quite challenged. And on top of that, you have things that that towns count on, which is they count on each of us to go out and buy new cars routinely, so that our excise tax gets, we pay more excise tax on the new car than the used car we were driving, and they kind of count on a certain percentage of us doing that each year. But a lot of us are going to be saying, okay, times are challenging. I'm going to keep driving the used car, the old car that I have, and hold on to that for another couple of years, which then lowers those excise taxes that the towns count on. So I actually worry more about what the local receipts look like and how that impacts the two towns' budgets than Chapter 70 being such a relatively speaking, such a small piece of the overall pie to run the district. Of course, not trying to be gloom and doom and gloom, but that's a reality that we've got there.
Thank you.
Other questions? So I think we could stop there. And as I said, I'm happy to answer other questions that people have. You're more than welcome to email me at any time. Just reach out. Happy to answer your questions. Just kind of loop things back to graduation. We want to find some way to celebrate our seniors, and I think the thing that makes me so sad as the parent of a senior is, there's no way that I see us this summer providing him the type of graduation that that I think he had in mind all along. And I've got a kid who has watched 18 years worth or 17 years worth of graduations happen, and has had this vision of what graduation would be like for years. And now we're in this situation where it's like I wish I could go and give he and every other senior that graduation that they had been dreaming about, and now trying to figure out how can we make the best of a really unprecedented situation that we've been dealt with, and do find ways to go celebrate some kids that that have done some great things and will go on and do great things in their futures. So thank you for coming. As I said, we had
Scott?
Yeah, Tina, go ahead.
Yeah, before you leave, I'm Tina Games, Vice Chair of the Monomoy Regional School Committee, but I'm going to take that hat off and speak as a parent. I just put this in the chat, and I'm wondering, it looks like several people are in agreement. I think it would really help a lot of our seniors. This is really emotional, and to have some type of conversation on a bigger level rather than just in their smaller groups, I think it just would help on a larger scale. And I'm just going to throw that out there, because all these unknowns, and I think there are all these emotions wrapped up in this. And I just think a bigger conversation as a class, even if it's a big virtual meeting or break them down, I'm not sure how you might do that, but I really sense that they need to talk through it.
I'll let Bill know, and I know that as I said, he's having chats I believe tomorrow with with the class leaders, and I think they'll be pulling bigger groups of students in.
Thank you. I just want to make sure everybody is heard in whatever way they need to be heard. So thank you.
Well, as I said, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedules tonight to be part of this. We had more people here tonight than I've ever had at a parent coffee. So this we'll chalk this up under the column of silver linings of COVID-19. So we'll find some blessings in there somewhere. So thank you so much, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Charles.
Hey, hi, Leah. Night.
See you tomorrow night.
See you tomorrow night indeed.
Same time, same place.
That's right. Good night, everybody. I'm stopping the recording.